Time to cover another Souls game on the channel. We previously looked at what I considered to be my favourite Souls game, Demon's Souls. I say considered because Demon's Souls has now been leapfrogged and shunted into second place by Sekiro. At first, I struggled with this one, as unlike the other Souls games such as Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Bloodborne and of course Demon's Souls, this one was pretty much centered around the parry, and this could get pretty intense at times. But this game, about 3 hours in, had me mesmerised. You see, I'd never played it, and the setting, the characters, the gameplay, the bosses, well, I was hooked. I played it for hours and hours, day after day, wanting to experience every ending, listen to every dialogue, to find all the secrets, to beat every boss, but then it was over. So I guess you could say that Sekiro left quite an impression on me. And I need to clarify that I'm not a Souls veteran by any means. I mean, I suck at Souls games. But again, I'm here to discuss the story. It's the Middle Ages in Japan, the Sengoku era, a period of military conflict, social issues and political turmoil. Leaders in the country were constantly at war with each other over land and power. Towards the end of the 1500s, deep into the mountains of Japan, one of these leaders, a master swordsman named Ashina of the Ashina clan, wrested control of some land in a coup backed by other estates in the region, in which Ishin defeated General Tamura. After the battle, a master shinobi, who were employed for operations such as espionage or assassinations, approaches a young boy who is kneeling on the battlefield. The shinobi, called Owl, cuts the boy's face with his blade, and the boy grabs the sharp blade, drawing blood. Owl then spares the boy and takes him away, naming the boy Wolf. The boy is trained in the way of the shinobi for around 2 decades, and places him in charge of the protection of Lord Kuro, who is a young boy that is the descendant of an ancient and rather mystic bloodline. Owl leaves Wolf and reminds him of something called the Iron Code, which is that his father, Owl's, rule is absolute, and that his master's rule, Lord Kuro's, is secondary. So 3 years later, and over 20 years since the coup, the Ashina clan is in trouble. There are threats to the Ashina clan in the form of an invading army, and in desperation, the Ashina's leader, Genichiro Ashina, who is Ishin's grandson, has kidnapped the young lord from the Hirata estate for the power in his blood, which is referred to as the Dragon's Heritage, as the Ashina clan think that it will help them. Lord Kuro is known as the Divine Heir for this very reason. Anyway, Wolf is now living in solitude inside a well, as Lord Kuro had been taken, who, remember, he had a duty to protect. Something significant had happened to Wolf too, but he unfortunately has little to no memory of what exactly. A mysterious lady then drops a note down into the well, and it reads, "Your destiny awaits you at the Moon Tower. Escape from the well and find the tower bathed in moonlight." Leaving the well with a sense of intrigue, Wolf, not having a weapon, sneaks around the guards patrolling the grounds around Ashina Castle, and 2 in particular talk about a boy in the Moon Tower, and they mention the Divine Heir. Moving on and scaling the side of a tower, Wolf finds Lord Kuro inside.
Yoku kite kureta. Hisashii na, Okami yo.
お迎えに参上いたしました。我が主。
表を上げよ。くさび丸、そなたの刀だ。我が忍びよ。主従の約定に従い、命を賭し、我に仕えよ。
御意。
The young lord also gives Wolf a special gourd filled with medicinal waters in order to heal his wounds, which was an item created by the apprentice of an extraordinary doctor called Dogen. With a renewed purpose, Wolf fights the guards and goes down to meet Lord Kuro at the entrance to the secret tunnel, and they walk through in order to leave, aiming to cross the Ashina border. However, coming out in a large field, Genichiro is there waiting for them. It's abundantly clear that Genichiro isn't going to allow Wolf to leave with Lord Kuro, so the two fight. Either way the fight goes, it culminates in Wolf having his left arm severed by Genichiro, leading to Wolf collapsing and Genichiro leaving, with Kuro being carried away by one of the ninja-like shinobi called the Nightjar. Waking up in a dilapidated temple, Wolf speaks with a mysterious monk known as the Sculptor. Wolf has been fitted with a prosthetic limb which previously belonged to the Sculptor, and he learns that it was the Sculptor who saved his life and took him to the temple. Wolf also learns that Lord Kuro is still alive, but of course, this is because of his blood and the fact that Lord Kuro's captors plan to exploit the power in it. Also there at the temple is a man named Hanbei, known as Hanbei the Undying, for his ability to resurrect. He was one of General Tamara's soldiers. After his death, a monk walked by and placed a centipede on his body. His story is detailed in the manga series Side Story, but we won't get too heavily into that in this video, but I would recommend checking it out if you're interested in that kind of thing. Entering into the Ashina outskirts, Wolf fights his way through to try and get to Ashina Castle, but at some point on the way Wolf may die, likely due to one of the generals blocking a route forwards. Wolf is able to resurrect mid-fight, and this is due to his link or oath to Lord Kuro, but on failing to resurrect, Wolf finds himself back at the temple, alive. The Sculptor now has a cough and tells Wolf that he's still alive as death is not his fate. Not yet, anyway. The Sculptor has what's known in this world as dragon rot, a strange illness that has appeared and has taken hold of the land of Ashina. It's linked to Wolf repeatedly dying, and spreads to anyone that Wolf has been in contact with until that point. After finally defeating the general, Wolf moves on. Dealing with hostile Ashina clan guards along with an ogre who was chained up and had red glowing eyes, Wolf meets a merchant named Anayama the Peddler, who tells him that he remembers him from that night, from the night Lord Kuro was taken. He offers some info about that night for a monetary incentive. Giving him the money, the man says that the Hirata family are part of the Ashina, but that he and his gang of thieves had broken into the estate and found it in the midst of a battle. This was a time when all the young samurai were away from home due to something known as the Dragon Spring Pilgrimage, so they set fire to the place and cleaned it out. He says that he met Wolf there that night, but that Wolf was looking for something. Wolf later comes to a bridge to Ashina Castle, but unfortunately, it's broken and impassable. This means that Wolf must go down into the valley to try and find a way around. At some point, Wolf may return to the dilapidated temple and find a woman there. She is called Lady Emma, and she was the mysterious woman that dropped the letter into the well, informing Wolf of Lord Kuro's location in the Moon Tower. Speaking with her, she says that Wolf was able to be revived by the power of the dragon's blood. She says that she's a doctor, serving a certain master, but that for his safety she cannot reveal this master's identity. She can reveal, though, that she was given orders by him to help Wolf in any way she can. Using a gourd seed that Wolf obtained, she manages to use it to imbue the healing gourd with increased volume. She knows how to do this because she is the one who created it for Kuro initially. She is the apprentice and daughter of the previously mentioned Dr. Dogen. She also asks about a white mark on Wolf's face, and she says that it's likely a result of being in receipt of the dragon's heritage. In a later meeting, she also talks about the dragon rot. She says that repeated use of the power leads to stagnation, and it will eventually overflow, causing those who don't have the power to become sick. She says that Dogen never managed to find a cure for it. Later, she is attending to the Sculptor who is suffering due to his affliction with dragon rot. She took some of the blood he coughed up, and in line with what she said earlier, it's tainted and stagnant. She asks for another sample from someone else that's struggling with dragon rot, in order for her to be able to study it further. But back to what Wolf was doing. Making his way down into the valley, Wolf feels the entire valley rumbling. It's soon revealed to be a giant serpent that is moving through the valley. He needs to avoid becoming prey of the day for this large serpent, so he sneaks around it and into a palanquin, a mode of transport designed to carry one person. Stabbing the serpent in the eye as it attempts to peer inside, Wolf makes a quick dash for it and escapes the serpent for now. Grappling over to the castle gate fortress, Wolf enters a large area in front of the gate and he encounters Gobu Oniwa, a former bandit who impressed Isshin Ashina, who then employed him as a minister of justice and gifted him the spear of General Tamara. He was also placed in charge of guarding the Ashina castle gate from intruders. That duty sees him immediately attack Wolf, and after a long, tough battle, Oniwa is taken down by Wolf. Afterwards, Wolf meets a man known as Tengu of Ashina. He is hunting and killing people he calls rats, and these are Central Force agents. He wants Wolf to help him by killing some of these rats. But before pushing on through the castle gate, let's go back to the dilapidated temple. If having obtained a sample of blood from someone suffering from dragon rot, Wolf returns to Lady Emma and presents it to her. After she's had some time to study it, she says that it shows similar condition to the sculptor's blood. Returning to her again later on, she says that the source of the dragon rot is indeed the stagnation. It's brought about by Wolf's blood only having a limited amount of power in it. After all that power has been used up and Wolf attempts to resurrect again upon death, the resurrection still occurs, but it now must draw from another source. And that source is those that have the dragon rot in them. The dragon rot essentially takes their life force from them. She explains that there is a cure by giving them back what has been taken from them, and this is done by using a dragon's blood droplet. By taking one of these drops to the sculptor's idol, the affliction in everyone in Ashina who is afflicted with the dragon rot will be cured. Anyway, Wolf needs to push on and head through the castle gate, but first, it's time to confront a lost memory. In the Ashina outskirts, Wolf can come across a blinded and mortally wounded man named Inosuke Nogami. He appears to recognize Wolf's voice. His mother is nearby in a destroyed house, and she asks Wolf if he is her son, to which he replies that he's not, but as her mind is failing her, she doesn't believe him, instead believing Wolf to be Inosuke just playing tricks on her. She gives Wolf a bell and tells him it's a charm that she had made with the young master Kuro in mind, asking that he offer it to Buddha for his sake. It's said that doing this, presenting the bell charm to Buddha, is a common courtesy. Taking the bell offering to the Buddha statue in the dilapidated temple, Wolf then recalls the memory he'd lost from the night of the attack, which of course was the night that Lord Kuro was taken by the Ashina clan. In line with what Anayama the peddler said, the estate is on fire. Wolf discovers a man on the path to the estate. He recognizes Wolf as the son of Owl. He tells Wolf that he must hurry as the divine heir is in trouble. True to Anayama's other words earlier, he did indeed meet Wolf there. He tells Wolf about some treasure inside a 3-story pagoda. Moving into the estate and making his way through, fighting off various members of the Ashina, Wolf comes to the main part of the estate where he finds his father and master Owl there, gravely injured. He gives Wolf the key to a secret temple at the back of the estate and tells him that he'll need to find a way round as the main entrance is blocked off by fire. Owl then passes away. Grappling round via a side path, Wolf then fights his way through a cave and comes out in the estate. Many bandits await him, but he takes them out, and then has to deal with their leader, Juzu the Drunkard. After he has been dealt with, Wolf finds Inosuke Nogami in a building, which explains why he recognized Wolf's voice. He warns Wolf that someone inside the secret temple is using illusion techniques, and this is likely how he lost his sight. He explains that Wolf will need snap seeds to combat the illusions, and he gives him some. Wolf then pulls away the tatami, and he enters the secret temple.
父上、母上、少女よ、皆どこへ行ったんだ。
巫女様、現実か。
久しいな、フクロウのせがれよ。
お嬢殿、言ってください。
そなたは
なすべきことをなすのです。
わかりました。
さて、やろうか、せがれ殿。
So Owl had Lady Butterfly train Wolf from a young age, but despite their bond, she is hostile towards him. Despite having to fight his mentor, Wolf defeats her.
腕を上げたね、狼。
However, upon seeing the Buddha statue collapse, Wolf is then stabbed through the chest from behind by someone. By whom is unclear, as what happens next is not known, since Wolf's memory of this night ends with the secret temple coming down around him, with Lord Kuro trying to help him, saying that Wolf fought bravely on his behalf, and that he cannot throw away such loyalty. It's at this point that Lord Kuro gave him the power in his blood, and this allowed him to survive as Wolf took the Oath of Immortality. Of course, after this, Lord Kuro was taken by the Ashina clan and back to Ashina Castle. At one point, he'd asked Lady Emma if there were any other survivors from Hirata estate, but Lady Emma responded that there were not many of them left. Kuro felt guilt, as it was his blood being the reason that these people were dead. At another point, Lord Kuro is speaking to Genichiro and talks about the invading army, the army of the Interior Ministry. Lord Kuro says that it doesn't matter how much power they obtain through his blood, as they will keep on fighting until they become monsters, incapable of feeling pain or fear. Kuro says that he does not wish to corrupt the lives of men, to which Genichiro responds that they cannot defend Ashina via the normal means. But back to the search for Lord Kuro again. Moving through the castle gates, Wolf can choose to take out the rats for Tengu, and can later return to him for instruction in a set of fighting techniques. Approaching another gate, Wolf has to deal with the Blazing Bull, a ferocious animal who was to be used in the upcoming battle against the invading army, and a beast that claimed the lives of many Ashina samurai in the last Great War, so they captured it. Defeating the beast, Wolf is now just outside the castle itself, and speaks with an old hag who appears to be praying. She mentions the Senpu Temple on Mount Kongo, and that a very holy person lives there. Past the gate, Wolf sees a remnant of a conversation where Lord Kuro was speaking with Lady Emma again, and he was to return to the top of the castle to see Genichiro. Kuro spoke to Wolf in case he was listening somehow, and spoke of the reed whistle they'd used before. He said to Wolf that he'll use it again in order to call on him. This gives Wolf a clue as to where in the castle the young lord is being kept. In another remnant, Kuro asks Emma what caused the state of some man, to which she replies that it was because of the rejuvenating waters. This is described as Ashina's secret weapon, and that those who drink the rejuvenating waters cannot die. The rejuvenating water springs from the dragon's blood too. That's why they need Lord Kuro. Defeating another general who is guarding the doors, Wolf finds that the doors to the castle are locked, so he takes to the rooftops in order to try and find a way into the castle from the other side. Fighting the nightjar on the rooftops, Wolf makes it round to an open window and is now inside the castle. He is in the upper tower's antechamber. In here, he fights the pupils of Isshin Ashina. Nonetheless, despite the tough opposition, including Isshin's best pupil waiting in the dojo, Wolf makes it through the antechamber and up to the top of the tower.
おじい様のご様子はどうだ。
一心様は命を保っておられるのが不思議なほどです。
そうか。巫女よ、もう一度言う。不死のちぎりを俺と結べ。
できませぬ、源一郎殿。たとえひとたび敗れるとも、命を落とし、主を必ず取り戻す。それが我が忍びなれば。
お迎えに参上いたしました。今しばらくお待ちくだされ。なるほどな。貴様を殺しきらぬ限り、流印を我が手にはできぬよ。
Wolf then faces off against the man who took his arm. Genichiro is moulding over the fact that Lord Kuro denied him immortality, so he's naturally quite aggressive. Despite this, Wolf manages to best him, but something happens to Genichiro.
見事だ、巫女の忍びよ。惜しいな。主を変えるつもりはないか。ざれ言。ざれ言だと。このアシナを守るためならば。 力であれ。従えてみせる。巴の雷、見せてやろう。
He draws on this lightning of Tomoe, but it does him no good as Wolf is able to deflect it back at him, and he is once again defeated.
Ashina.
With his vengeance against Genichiro now satisfied, in line with the code, Wolf speaks with Lady Emma. He initially considers she may be hostile, but tensions soon calm. Something else happens to Genichiro and he revives, with Emma wondering if this is a result of the aforementioned rejuvenating waters. Before jumping off the tower and escaping, Genichiro talks about how Ashina is everything to him, and that he will even shed his own humanity for her sake. After Genichiro has departed, speaking with Emma again, she says that she's finally managed to fulfill her master's orders. She reveals her master is Isshin Ashina. She is his doctor, as he is sick, which of course was what her and Genichiro were speaking about. Wondering just why Isshin had Lady Emma help Wolf, she states that Lord Isshin has no desire to use the dragon's heritage. Isshin was the one who tried to help Lord Kuro escape Ashina by having him move to the moon tower, and he had Lady Emma deliver the letter to Wolf while he was in the well. Moving downstairs, Wolf reunites with Lord Kuro, telling him that they should leave the castle. Kuro tells Wolf they cannot leave without doing something first. Kuro is guilty that his blood is the reason men are becoming undying, that immortality eventually leads to corruption. He says he wishes to sever the chains of stagnation, the ties of immortality that are bred by the dragon's heritage. Kuro asks for Wolf's help in this task, so Wolf accepts the task. Lord Kuro says that if they wish to sever those ties, then he knows a good place to start. He produces an Immortal Severance text which speaks of a rite of Immortal Severance, that one needs to travel beyond the Fountainhead Palace to the sanctuary and imbibe the tears of the holy dragon of the divine realm. Lord Kuro thinks that these dragon tears have the power to sever the dragon's heritage. Pointing out an incense burner, they look at it, and Kuro says that a long time ago there was another divine heir living in Ashina Castle, and that his name was Lord Takeru. The incense burner belonged to him. He talked about being wrapped in the aroma of the Fountainhead, returning him to the divine realm. Therefore, the scent of the Fountainhead is key to reaching this divine realm. Kuro will look at the books and suggests that Wolf go and speak to Isshin about how to sever the immortal ties. So Wolf goes to see the old man, who is in one of the watchtowers. He says that Genichiro, who he calls his grandson, was bewitched by the rejuvenating waters and thanks Wolf for putting a stop to what he was trying to do. He realizes that Wolf is the son of Owl. Asking about how to sever the ties of immortality, Isshin mentions a sword called the Mortal Blade, and that this blade is the key. With it, Wolf will be able to kill one that cannot die through normal means. Isshin refers to them as the Infested. He then says the Mortal Blade is held in Senpu Temple, which, as heard earlier, is located in Mount Kongo. It's said, though, that the Mortal Blade cannot be drawn. Isshin says that the gates to the temple are closed, so Wolf will need to find another way in through the abandoned dungeon. As a side note, if you're curious about what happened to Genichiro, and just how he was able to call upon lightning for this fighting style, well, Genichiro isn't actually Isshin's grandson. Genichiro was born a peasant, and after his mother died, he was taken in by the Ashina. If, after defeating him, you treat Isshin to some lovely sake, he spills the beans on some more of Genichiro's fighting style. He speaks of the lightning of Tomoe, that it's a technique that belonged to Genichiro's mentor, who was called Tomoe. She was a master of the sword, and seeing her fight was like watching a dance. Isshin says he fought her, but fighting her was the closest he'd ever come to death. In the dojo underneath the top of the tower, it's clear that at some point Genichiro turned to this heretical art, the lightning of Tomoe, in order to try and save Ashina. But let's now follow Wolf on his journey to help Lord Kuro sever the ties of immortality. Wolf returns to Lord Kuro after speaking with Isshin. Sharing the news about the Mortal Blade, Lord Kuro mentions that he's found something, and that is the existence of a lotus flower. A note written by Lord Takeru states that to find the lotus flower, one should find a key where the rejuvenating waters converge into a deep pool. Lord Kuro states that water flows from the fountainhead through Ashina. He suggests that this deep valley may be the Sunken Valley, which is through the woods to the rear of the castle. They then talk about a stone, a fragrant stone that is apparently located in a sacred village below Ashina. Kuro mentions the well Wolf woke up in being connected to some sort of bottomless hole as well. Finally, mentioning the incense burner, Kuro refers to the lingering scent in there and likens it to sakura flowers. Wolf insists that the scent reminds him of something. Kuro states that Emma mentioned a sakura tree to the rear of the castle, and asking her, she calls it an everblossom. It was the tree that Lord Takeru brought there from his homeland in the Divine Realm, and a tree that was in constant bloom no matter the season. It no longer exists though, as it withered away due to someone cutting off a branch and taking the flowers from the tree. Before leaving, Wolf tells Kuro about the tree, and they resign themselves to the fact that they have no leads on this everblossom branch. Wolf heads through the woods behind the castle and runs into Tengu again, who is hunting more of the ministry rats. And then Wolf heads deep down into the sunken valley in pursuit of the White Lotus, the Mortal Blade, and lastly, a Shelter Stone. Deeper into the Sunken Valley itself, Wolf is fired upon by many of the Sunken Valley clan. They are descendants of an ancient clan called the Okami clan. They are led by someone known as Snake Eyes. Defeating her and making his way around the sharp-eyed marksman, Wolf makes it through the gun fort where he enters a cave and has to fight a ferocious monster known as the long-armed centipede giraffe. After this absolute parry fest, Wolf opens the doors of the gun fort, but crossing the bridge, the serpent returns and destroys the bridge, knocking Wolf off of it and into the water below, where he has to avoid it once again. But making it to shore, he grapples his way up into the Bodhisattva Valley, and he has to fight many monkeys which were armed with rifles and swords. Wolf has found the location of the lotus flower, but it's guarded by a large ape, the guardian ape. He's guarding it because he wants to use it in order to attract a mate. Anyway, Wolf fights the large ape and defeats it, landing a final blow by beheading it. However, the ape then picks its head up and is still in the fight. It occasionally lets out a death scream, but stunning the beast and stabbing its open wound, a centipede is visible. The fight over, the ape disappears but lets out a roar. With the beast gone, Wolf heads into the small cave and obtains the lotus of the palace. 2 more items left to obtain. If Wolf decides to go back to report his progress to Lord Kuro, then the young lord will talk of a second scent they need for the aroma. That scent is the blood of the divine heir, Kuro's blood. Only problem is that Kuro cannot bleed, none of the divine heirs can. He found a note in Genichiro's quarters which stated that there was something that could help him draw his own blood. Asking Lady Emma, she directs Wolf to the Senpu Temple in the mountains. They'll need the mortal blade that Ishin had mentioned, and that will draw Kuro's blood. So, Wolf heads off to go and find it. Heading into the abandoned dungeon, swimming through the waters down here, Wolf takes an elevator up and comes out in a place where he hears a voice calling to him. He finds the source of this voice, and it's a girl who says that the Buddhist monks at the Senpu Temple have strayed from the teachings of Buddha. She warns Wolf about being captured by the monks and advises that he turn around and leave, but Wolf obviously chooses to ignore this warning and continues on to the temple. Multiple bodies seem to have been tied up, killed, and discarded. What have the monks here been up to? Fighting his way into the temple or sneaking inside, Wolf sees some monks that are gathered around an immortal monk, who, like we have seen before, has a centipede living inside him. Although he looks dead, he's still technically still alive. Wolf moves on again and travels the perilous mountainside pathways up to a bridge where he has to deal with a fully suited knight. Eventually he makes it to the main temple itself and approaches the altar. Ringing a bell, Wolf finds himself in the Halls of Illusion. He immediately sees some screen panels which feature 3 monkeys, but one is blank. Wolf approaches the lone monk there, who tells him that once he's defeated the monkeys there, he will hear the divine child's voice. One monkey has incredible sight, one has incredible hearing, and another makes a loud sound when it sees or hears danger. Navigating these difficult monkeys, nothing happens, and that is because there's a 4th monkey. This one is invisible, hence the blank screen. But taking it out, he hears the voice of the divine child, asking Wolf to forgive the monkeys as they only sought to keep her hidden. She tells Wolf they should meet at the inner sanctum. So placing his hands together, he is now in the inner sanctum, just outside the temple itself. Heading inside, Wolf meets with the divine child and tells her that he seeks the mortal blade. She says that no one that has ever drawn the sword has survived. So after she reveals the sword, Wolf picks up the sword, draws it, and it kills him. Thankfully, Wolf is revived by the blood of the divine heir again, much to the surprise of the divine child, who realizes that Wolf carries the curse of the dragon's heritage. She then says that she's one of the children of the rejuvenating waters. So basically, we'll now discuss what the monks have been up to here in the temple. A Senpu esoteric text states that the monks were disciplined in their fight against Buddha's enemies, but that changed when they became obsessed with the undying. Having abandoned their faith in pursuit of this immortality, they instead started to experiment on children in the hope of producing their own version of the divine heir. And in doing so, they created the false dragon's heritage, but many children died in this pursuit. Since the Halls of Illusion is a place that exists between life and death, the divine children's departed souls would take shelter in the monkeys of the temple, and this is why the divine child spoke of them like they were friends. She is now the last living bearer of the false dragon's heritage, as the only one that survived the monk's process. She says that she's unsure about severing the ties of immortality, but knows that the dragon's heritage corrupts people, so she decides to assist Wolf and Kuro in doing so. Holding out his hands, Wolf receives rice from the divine child, which will increase vigour. With the mortal blade in hand now, Wolf leaves the Senpu temple and heads for the final item, the Shelter Stone. Interestingly, returning to Ashina with the mortal blade, he will comment about the Crimson Blade, and tells him that with the mortal blade, he can kill the undying now, and for good. But the interesting part is when Wolf eavesdrops on Ishin after this conversation. He speaks of another sword, one with a blackened edge, that Genichiro has. Back in the abandoned dungeon and dealing with one of the Shichimen warriors, Wolf jumps down to the bottomless hole that Kuro mentioned. Grappling to a ledge, Wolf emerges in the Ashina depths. Walking through a connecting cave, Wolf sees an old friend. As was to be expected, the headless ape is not dead. Remember the centipede inside the headless ape? This links back to what Ishin said about the infested. Anyone or anything that partook in the divine waters in Ashina has one of these grotesque centipedes living inside their body. Because the once flowing water had become stagnant, it had become corrupted, and instead of cleansing them, it did the exact opposite. The powers of its immortality were still there, only it was a corrupted form of that immortality. Hence why Kuro wishes to break this curse. Anyway, disturbing the headless ape, Wolf engages it in battle, and after hurting it some, it lets out its death scream and summons its mate. So Wolf now has to deal with two of them. Thankfully, the second ape isn't that strong and is easy to take down, and he also kills the headless ape, again. But this time he has the mortal blade and uses it to kill the centipede, and it's this which puts the ape down forever. Leaving the cave, Wolf comes out into the hidden forest, in which he fights apparitions of soldiers, dogs, and the nightjar. In this foggy forest, he also speaks with a monk, who says that someone in an abandoned temple up ahead poses the Buddha. He sealed the village away in a shadowy fog in order to fool the villagers. Moving forward and either fighting or avoiding the apparitions, Wolf finds a way round and up into the abandoned temple the old monk spoke of. Inside, he finds a strange creature known as a mist noble, and the melody he's playing creates an illusion which covers the area in fog, obscuring the village up ahead. Killing the mist noble, it removes the illusion, revealing the pristine temple to be completely run down and destroyed. Wolf pushes on ahead and arrives in Mibu village. The locals here are strange. Seems they've been partaking in the rejuvenating waters and have been corrupted, and are extremely hostile. One villager is terrified and hiding in his home, having avoided the waters until now. He only avoided the insanity because he threw up after drinking a lot of sake, which the head priest of the village treats the villagers to. But as sake makes people thirsty, they seek out water, and the villagers ended up drinking the water in the ponds and rivers. The head priest had told them if they drank enough sake, they would become citizens of the palace. Leaving him there, Wolf can return shortly afterwards and finds the man having given in to the thirst, and he's gone mad from the waters. Moving forward, leaving the main part of the village, Wolf crosses a bridge and finds the head priest's house. Entering, Wolf speaks with him, and he's guzzling sake. He's talking about how good it feels. He seems to be experiencing this same thirst that gripped the villagers, and he's talking about the citizens of the palace. Leaving, Wolf heads towards the wedding cave, but is confronted by the apparition of the corrupted monk, who is watching over the cave's entrance. Wolf fights her and manages to dispel her by defeating her in battle, obtaining the ability to breathe underwater. Entering the wedding cave, Wolf obtains the Shelter Stone. People who have long drank from the Fountainhead waters are said to have had these stones inside their bodies. But with the 3 ingredients needed, Wolf plans to head back to Lord Kuro. However, there's a problem. He's no longer able to use the sculptor's idol to travel back to Lord Kuro, nor to most of the idols in Ashina Castle. Going to an alternative idol, Wolf soon finds out why this is. A guard sits on a step in the castle and wonders why he has not yet been relieved as his shift has ended. Crossing a bridge, Wolf sees that the Central Forces have now begun their invasion, and the Central Force agents are clearing the castle of the Ashina. Fighting his way through Ashina Castle, Wolf comes across a dying Nightjar who tells him that Lady Emma and the Divine Heir are being targeted. If Wolf makes it to Ishin's tower, Lady Emma is there with him, making sure that he doesn't try to go and fight. The old man is pretty sick, but upon giving him sake, he opens up and says that the rebellion, the coup in which they took back the lands of Ashina, was actually because the land was theirs to begin with, but before they were weak, and that's why the Ashina ended up submitting. However, upon eavesdropping on Lady Emma and Ishin, he says that Genichiro will show up eventually and put the other mortal blade to use, that he'll abandon who he is in order to protect Ashina. Ishin says that he cannot let his grandchild, Genichiro, use Lord Kuro's blood. He mentions the Tengu, and that the Tengu may soon be no more. They speak of Wolf, or Sekiro, and Ishin says that he fascinates him. The reason why Emma really needs to watch him, well, remember the Tengu, the one who asked Wolf to help him with the rat problem. The Tengu is Ishin Ashina. Man's clearly still got some pep in his step. Anyway, Wolf eventually makes it to the top of the tower.
お主のことはよく覚えているぞ。死んだと聞いていたが、一体何を企んでいる？フクロウよ。
企むなど滅相も。さあ、我と共に参りましょうぞ。この袋は巫女様の尊いその恩知をお守りしたいだけにございます。
お主は流因に見入られたか。話すことはない。去るがよい。
はいすみませぬが懐かしきこの眺めをもうしばし堪能したか。満足しましたら帰ります。
Approaching Owl, he tells Wolf that making everyone believe that he was dead all this time was part of his plan. It's clear now that Owl was the one that arranged the attack on the estate. He thought that Wolf had died there. He talks about the power of the Divine Heir and that the dragon's blood must be his. Owl reminds Wolf of the Iron Code, that as his father, he's ordering him to forsake his master, so therefore it needs to be so. Therefore, Wolf has a choice to make. Right, so if Wolf refuses to forsake Kuro and breaks the Iron Code, Owl is bewildered by Wolf's show of compassion. He reminds him of the Shinobi Code, but Wolf says a code is one that is determined by the individual. Turning his back on Owl, Wolf walks away, but Owl draws his sword quietly and tries to kill Wolf, but Wolf has gotten a little bit more skilled since they last met. The two then fight, and Wolf must now defeat his master and his father. Eventually, after Owl has been defeated, Wolf obtains an aromatic branch. This is the Everblossom branch that was needed for the Fountainhead Aroma. This means that it was Owl that took the branch and killed the Everblossom tree, for he was in pursuit of the dragon's heritage for himself. This is why Wolf said that he recognised the scent in the incense burner from somewhere, as Owl had the branch. However, it must be noted that the branch has no flowers on it. Anyway, after this, Wolf goes to speak with Kuro. Kuro tearfully thanks Wolf for his loyalty. He's surprised to see the Everblossom branch. One step closer to the Fountainhead incense, Wolf gives over all the ingredients to Kuro. He speaks of an inscription he saw in the wedding cave which spoke of a sweetly scented bridal offering. Wolf suspects that this may just be the gateway to the divine realm, so they create the incense, and Lord Kuro makes a small cut using the mortal blade. With the incense burning, Kuro calls it nostalgic. Wolf says that the aroma has burned the words Fountainhead Palace into his mind, and Kuro surmises that the palace must lead to the divine realm. Eavesdropping on Kuro talking to himself, he's saying that he must do what needs to be done. Speaking with Lady Emma about it, she says that Lord Takeru's memoirs made mention of beheading. Emma suggests that beheading is the means to end immortality and the life of the divine heir, saying that Wolf may need to use the mortal blade to do this to Lord Kuro, as Kuro desires immortal severance. But she asks Wolf to try and find a path where Lord Kuro can be spared. She gives Wolf a note written by Tomoe, saying that she wished to set Lord Takeru free from the dragon's heritage, but that she could not acquire the mortal blade. Emma states that there is a way to cut the ties of the dragon's heritage and transform Kuro into a regular human. Emma says she's going to go to the graves of Lord Takeru and Lady Tomoe. Following her there, she says that she's struggling to remember anything, so she goes to see the sculptor. Meeting her there, she says that the sculptor is unable to help either, but upon speaking to him, he alludes to a draft in the temple. Finding a gap in the wall, Wolf eavesdrops on their conversation. She reveals that to achieve the goal of Immortal Severance, either Wolf or Lord Kuro must die, and it's clear that this fact distresses Emma, which is why she was keeping that information from both Kuro and Wolf. Confronting Emma, she's still playing dumb, but she eventually reveals the truth. She'd seen something when underneath the branches of the Everblossom tree. Lady Tomoe tried to end herself in an attempt to unshackle Lord Takeru from the shackles of the oath, and this was because she couldn't find the mortal blade for the purification. In order for the dragon heritage to be broken, he or she, who is bound by the oath to the divine heir, must die. Pushing her further, she gives Wolf a bell charm that was held by Owl, a different memory of what happened at the Hirata estate on that fateful night. Wolf approaches the Buddha in the dilapidated temple and offers the charm. Wolf finds himself back at the Hirata estate again. Killing a shinobi working for the Interior Ministry in the spot where Wolf saw Owl apparently die, where he faked his death, Wolf discovers that the bandit attack on Hirata estate was actually a cover-up, as it was the Interior Ministry who attacked the estate. Eavesdropping on Juzu the Drunkard, Wolf discovers they were working with Owl, who of course betrayed the Hirata clan as he wanted to kidnap Kuro for his power. Wolf makes his way to where he fought and killed Lady Butterfly and finds Owl there instead. Beating him in combat once again, Wolf obtains the blossomed flower, which is the branch, but as it's from 3 years ago, it still has its flowers. As for how this memory is possible, it's certainly possible that since the first memory, Wolf knew a little bit more about Owl, and the fact that he betrayed the Hirata clan. Returning to Ashina, Wolf tells Lady Emma that he now has the blossom branch. Wolf then sets out for the wedding cave to give the incense as offering. Arriving at the outskirts of the Fountainhead Palace, Wolf crosses a bridge and has to deal with the corrupted monk, the real-life version of the apparition he fought earlier in order to obtain access to the wedding cave. Having dealt with her and severing her immortality with Mortal Blade, Wolf moves to a new area and is now looking over the palace. Heading down to the palace, the area is flooded, and the palace partially destroyed. Fighting his way through palace nobles along with other members of the palace guard, Wolf spots an Okami leader perched on a large tree, who will electrify the waters, so therefore Wolf cannot swim across the water to get to the palace. Finding his way round, he comes to a bridge, but it gets destroyed by a huge carp that goes by the name the Great Carp. Thankfully, he has a grapple hook, so he bypasses the need for the bridge. Clearing out Okami warriors, he finds that the door to the temple is locked, so he needs to find his way around. Wolf takes out the Okami leader, thereby allowing him to swim in the water now. Wolf encounters an old woman on the roof of the destroyed building, and she asks if he's going to the palace and says that if he is, then he should use the back entrance. It's underwater, but Wolf can swim through a large cave to get there. However, it's where the great carp sleeps, apparently. He finds the large cave and, avoiding the great carp so he doesn't end up as lunch, Wolf comes out on the other side and grapples up to the palace grounds. Entering a small area, Wolf finds that all the palace nobles in there are corrupted and are feeding on the Okami warriors. Killing them, Wolf moves on up the path and comes to the sanctuary, and inside a hollowed out rock before an altar is the body of a maid. Praying at the altar, Wolf is then transported to the Divine Realm, where he first faces off against the Divine Dragon's worshippers. Getting all of them out of the way and directing lightning back at the dragon, it is eventually stunned, and Wolf climbs it, defeats it, and collects the Divine Dragon Tears. Having now returned to Ashina Castle, Wolf speaks with Emma, who is kneeling next to the dead Ishin. He's got his sword in his hand, so someone obviously killed him, although Emma says that he merely succumbed to his illness. Either way, with Ishin dead, the central forces have taken the opportunity to attack the castle. She gives him a key to a secret passage, the same secret passage that Wolf and Kuro tried to escape Ashina through. Kuro has used the passage to escape, and Wolf is to meet him there in the Silvergrass field. Leaving and making his way there, Wolf sees that, true to what Emma said, the central forces have indeed invaded Ashina Castle. Fighting various elites, Wolf eventually makes it to the secret passage, and walking down it and into the field, someone else is there with Kuro.
Kuro-sama.
久しいな、巫女の忍び。見よ、不思議のもう一振りよ。
健一郎殿。そのようなものでは決してアシナの命運は変わりませぬ。狼よ、流因など誰の手にもあるべきではないのだ。苦労をかけるな。
御意。
参る。
ああ、しまいとしよう。
Facing off against Genichiro again, who hits a little bit harder now that he has the other mortal blade, Wolf nonetheless defeats him.
俺は結局何もできなかった。だが流因がこの国を生かす。これでアシナの世は明ける。
哀れな孫の最後の願いじゃ。わしはこのアシナをよみがえらせねばならぬ。ゆえに赤炉。
If you're unsure of what the hell just happened, basically Genichiro opened a gate to the other side and resurrected Ishin Ashina in his prime using the Black Blade. He was able to do this as Ishin, of course, had recently died. And of course, since Ishin was holding his sword when he died, it was likely Genichiro who killed him so he could do what he just did. This is what Ishin meant when he said that Genichiro plans to sacrifice every part of himself for Ashina. Anyway, Wolf must now fight Ishin, the Sword Saint. As expected, he's extremely fast, strong, and very skilled. Remember, this is him in his prime. However, after a long fight against Ishin, Wolf prevails. As Lord Kuro lies bleeding on the ground in the Silvergrass field, Wolf now has 3 options. So, the Immortal Severance ending is achieved by obtaining the 3 ingredients, disobeying Owl, obtaining the Dragon's Tears, and then defeating Genichiro and Ishin. With the Divine Dragon Tears in his possession, Wolf sets out to do what their plan was from the start. Giving them to Kuro, Wolf then stabs Kuro through the heart with a mortal blade, and this severs the ties to immortality. In the aftermath of this, Wolf takes off his prosthetic arm and goes to the dilapidated temple, where he takes the sculptor's place, carving Buddha statues. He will remain there until a new shinobi arrives, much like he himself did. Emma is there too, and she lays the prosthetic arm on the ground, saying that no doubt the day will come. So that was pretty bleak. Let's move on to the Purification ending. The Purification ending is achieved by obtaining the 3 ingredients, eavesdropping on Kuro talking about what must be done, speaking with Emma about there being another way, more eavesdropping, revisiting the Hirata estate and defeating Owl again to obtain the branch, obtaining the Divine Dragon Tears, and defeating Genichiro and Ishin. Giving Kuro the Divine Dragon Tears and the Everblossom, in line with what Wolf and Emma learned, Wolf beheads himself with the mortal blade, severing the ties to immortality and freeing Lord Kuro from the dragon's heritage, telling him to embrace what it means to be human. Afterwards, Kuro and Emma visit Wolf's grave. Lord Kuro is to leave Ashina, saying he will live for every moment, and he will then pass on, just as Wolf did for him. He thanks Lady Emma and leaves. Now for the Return ending. This ending, like the Purification ending, requires multiple steps to be completed. During his adventures, Wolf can also find at the bottom of the lake in Mibu village, or be given it by a monk in the temple before he's completely corrupted, a holy chapter called Infested. It talks about the monk having been blessed by the worm. Anyway, returning to the Divine Child at some point, taking the rice from her eventually makes her sick. So, Wolf helps her recover by giving her a persimmon. After recovering, she gives Wolf some rice to give to Kuro. Giving the rice to him, Kuro is thankful. He cooks the rice and makes a rice ball, giving it to Wolf. Returning to the Divine Child again, she is delighted that he made something with the rice, and later on, she's praying to her friends that lost their lives, stating that she cannot help but detest the monks for what they did. Giving her the holy chapter, Infested, she reads it, but later on she's moved to the Halls of Illusion, where she appears to be saying goodbye to her lost friends. She says that she thinks they should aim not to sever the dragon's heritage, but instead return it to its rightful place. She explains that the dragon's heritage was set free from its homeland to the west, and that at some point it drifted to Japan, and that its power was never meant for this land. It will only continue to corrupt those that encounter it. Only problem is that she's unsure of where its homeland is. She suggests the high priest of Senpu Temple would know. She directs Wolf to a narrow cave not too far from the inner sanctum. Wolf obtains the holy chapter Dragon's Return from the high priest's corpse. The book talks about cold dragon tears and talks of 2 serpentine fruits. Outside of the main hall near to the temple, Wolf can come across the old hag, the woman he saw repeatedly throughout Ashina. She's talking about the fruits of the serpent and the fact that there are 2 kinds, one fresh and the other is dried. She points over the edge and says that it's over there. Later on, Wolf can find a cave and can spot the serpent that had been causing him trouble for a while, down in the valley below him. Jumping down, Wolf delivers a death blow and kills the serpent, receiving the fresh serpent viscera. Later on, finding the poisoned valley, the old hag is there again, still talking about the fruits of the serpent. Going down into the sunken valley cavern, Wolf finds another serpent down there. It looks at him menacingly, but after using a monkey to distract the giant snake, Wolf enters a shack inside the cavern and obtains the dried serpent viscera. With the 2 serpentine fruits obtained, Wolf returns to the Divine Child, who is now back at the inner sanctum, and gives the 2 serpent fruits to her, which basically turn her into a cradle for the divine heir, meaning that she will become a vessel for it. As this action makes her lose some, if not all of her humanity, she appears to be in pain for a while. However, upon returning later, she's all good again, and says that she's succeeded in becoming the Cradle. She produces frozen tears in line with the words written in the holy chapter Wolf obtained from the High Priest's remains. Anyway, fast forward to the final battle. After defeating Genichiro and Swordmaster Isshin, Wolf gives the frozen tears and the Divine Dragon's tears to Kuro. Wolf then takes Kuro to the Divine Child, and she performs the ritual to become the Cradle, or a vessel for Kuro, who passes on. She says goodbye to her deceased friends and leaves for the west with Wolf, in order to take the dragon's heritage back to where it came from, which is the birthplace of the Divine Dragon. With those 3 endings covered, there's one more, and this can be achieved a bit earlier on in the game, before going to the Fountainhead Palace. Let's go back to the moment Wolf has to make a choice between the Iron Code and loyalty to Lord Kuro. So let's cover what is considered to be the worst ending, and look at what happens if Wolf obeys the Iron Code by siding with his father, and therefore choosing to forsake Kuro.
それでこそわしのせがれよ。これで我が波動もこれは物騒なお客人じゃ。だが道元殿のご息女と争うては今は亡きあのお方に申し訳が立たん。ほう、なかなかどうして。狼よ、そなたに任す。見事打ち破ってみせよ。
御意。
私はかつて修羅を見ました。あなたの中に同じものがいる。それを切らねばなりません。
Facing off against Lady Emma, who is certainly no pushover, Wolf finally dispatches her. And before she dies, she calls him Shura, and this is something Isshin spoke of when receiving sake earlier on.
お主、この酒の別の名を知っておるか？
知りません。
知らぬか。こいつはな、修羅酒とも言う。昔、わしは修羅を、いや、修羅のごときものを切ったことがある。
それは一体。
切り続けたものはやがて修羅となる。何のために切っていたか、それすら忘れ、ただ切る喜びのみに心をとらわれるのじゃ。お主の目にも修羅の影があるぞ。せいぜいわしに切られぬよう肝に銘じろ。
With Isshin cradling Emma in his arms, he rises and says that he must cut Wolf down before he falls to Shura, and the two face off. Isshin is still just as badass as he was in his prime, but eventually, and after a long fight, the old man is killed. After the fighting has ended, Wolf stands over the body of Isshin, and Owl approaches him. He says that nothing stands in their way now, not Ashina, not the interior ministers, that the whole country is theirs for the taking. Then, Wolf stabs Owl in the back, through his chest, with Owl in disbelief, calling Wolf Shura. Lord Kuro then crawls out of the burning building and spots Wolf, he too in disbelief that Wolf is Shura. In the aftermath, soldiers and townsfolk died by the thousands, with Ashina becoming the location of the most tragic massacre of this era of Japan's history. It was said that a demon lurked the land. And that's the Shura ending. With all the endings covered, that's pretty much it for the main explanation of Sekiro. But time for a bonus section where we discuss some side quests and tie off some loose ends. At some point on his travels, Wolf can go back to the well he woke up in and can meet a man named Jinzemon, who is someone dedicated to patrolling the castle's moat. He is in pursuit of a melody that he's been hearing. He describes the sound as one that stirs his soul. one that is yearning and calling for someone. He's bewitched by it, but Wolf cannot hear it. He claims the sound had led him to the well, but checking it out, there's nothing down there but an Interior Ministry agent who claims to have been down there looking for a cowardly wolf. Defeating him, Wolf finds another secret passageway to the abandoned dungeon. Inside the abandoned dungeon, Wolf can find Jinzemon there again. He followed the melody down there. He says that the melody seems to be calling out for someone, that it's crying. He thinks it may be calling to him and says that he'll keep following it. Leaving him there, Wolf can later encounter Jinzemon in the hidden forest. He says that she is gone, but that she was there only moments ago. He says that he finally saw her, that the shamisen player is a woman, and he calls her a beautiful yet fleeting presence, and says that she disappeared into the mist. The melody had obviously disappeared into the fog in the hidden forest. After Wolf has made his way through Mibu village, he can find Jinzemon there, but he's gravely injured. He says that the shamisen player is just beyond there, and sure enough, Wolf can find Orin of the Water there, crying and saying she doesn't know where a Lord Sakuza is. He can speak with her and she'll become hostile, or he can walk past her, not acknowledging her, also making her hostile. Killing her and returning to Jinzemon, he thanks him for bringing the shamisen player to him. He then passes away. Shortly after encountering the Tengu and receiving the mission about the rats that need taking care of, Wolf can eavesdrop on them and hear them speaking about someone named Black Hat Badger. They're talking about him fighting near to the Serpent Valley. Well, finding him, he's exhausted from the fighting and is trying to rest. He then introduces himself and says that he's somewhat of a fugitive. He needs some money, so he sells some items. After buying enough items, the Black Hat Badger says he's moving on to the Senpu Temple. Sure enough, later on, near to the Senpu Temple, Wolf can find Black Hat Badger there, and again speaking with him, he says that he's trying to cross to the other side of the cliff but can't find a way to do it. He points out a shinobi kite high up in the air, but he needs to keep the kite afloat, and there's an assassin below who handles the kite, but it needs to be kept in place. Returning later with a ninjutsu called Puppeteer, Wolf can force the assassin to lift the kite up, and this helps Black Cat over. Finding his way over there later, Wolf meets Black Hat Badger inside a cave where he is at the grave of his child. He says that the work he did after his kid died only served to rub him the wrong way. He reveals that he aided the monks in their experiments with the rejuvenating waters by kidnapping. After that, he heads back to Ashina Castle. Going back there later, during the invasion by the Central Forces, Black Hat is very badly injured. As Kuro was making his escape to the secret passage to escape, Central Forces soldiers were going after him, so Black Hat Badger protected him and fought most of them off, giving Kuro time to escape. Black Hat Badger then passes away. Through conversation with Lady Emma, we hear about a man named Dujun. He worked with Emma's father, Dogen. Emma is talking about the fact that Genichiro drank the sediment, the rejuvenating waters, and not just the waters themselves. The sediment is a highly concentrated part, and this made Genichiro very strong. His body became resilient, and this meant that he could survive physical injury that would kill anyone else. This also resulted in his eyes appearing red after he was revived. These red eyes are also something Wolf encountered through the chained ogres. Emma says that this was being researched by Dogen, but his reports on it were all destroyed. One of the senior apprentices managed to salvage the research, and this was Dujun. Upon going into the abandoned dungeon, Wolf can approach the aforementioned Dujun, who is undertaking experiments. Speaking with him, he asks for a favour. He says that he's been tasked with preparing a medical treatment using, the rejuvenating waters. He wants subjects for his experiments. According to a letter from a surgeon, he requires a strong man, a samurai, or a large soldier like those of the Taro troop, the large enemies that Wolf has encountered in Ashina. Now, the samurai that can be lured to Dujun is Jinzemon. As for the large Taro troop member, just outside the temple, Wolf can meet Kotaro, a childlike monk. He can be lured to Dujun too, although he does have his own quest line, which we'll discuss after this one. After luring one of these to the dungeon, Wolf will be tasked with going to Mibu village and obtaining the red eyes from a carp in the pond. Doing so and giving them back to Dujun, returning there later we'll see Wolf eavesdropping on Dujun in a moment where his master, Dosaku, has used something on Dujun. Dosaku explains that Dujun is the next subject, and Dujun shouts that Dosaku has strayed from the path of medicine, and that he has been bewitched by the rejuvenating waters. As for the person that Wolf had lured to the dungeon, Wolf will end up fighting them, and they'll have red glowing eyes. Defeating them and returning to Dujun, he's crying and calling out for his master, asking why he won't answer him. Returning to the small island where he encountered Jinzemon or Kotaro, Dujin will be on there. He has red eyes and is therefore hostile, and has a fighting technique similar to those of the Senpu Temple, indicating that he was once a monk there. He'd lost his mind, and I say that because on defeating him, the academic's red lump implies that they are the same person. This brings to an end Dujin's questline. Now let's say that Wolf decided not to trick Kotaro by sending him to the doctor. Speaking with Kotaro unlocks a new quest. It seems that he's lost something. Basically, Kotaro was charged with watching over the children of the rejuvenating waters, but at some point the children disappeared. He's looking for a pure white flower. After looking round, this pure white flower is actually a white pinwheel. Now, Wolf can send Kotaro to the merchant Anayama. After a conversation with him reveals that he's looking for a strong person to scour the battlefield for loot after a battle, but this ends with Kotaro dying when central forces end up invading Ashina. If giving Kotaro the pure white flower, he asks to be spirited away, and after doing so, Wolf later meets him at the Halls of Illusion, where he receives a Taro persimmon, which can be given to the Divine Child of Rejuvenation. Speaking with an old woman at the Fountainhead Palace, she asks a favour. She says that her father has been turned into a noble as a result of the rejuvenating waters, and has found himself entranced by the great carp. All he seems to do is feed it. Another old woman, who told Wolf about the cave entrance to the palace grounds, who is another daughter of the man, is found repeatedly stabbing one of the palace nobles. From what she says, it seems that her father was tricked by the palace nobles into drinking the waters, leading to him turning into a monster. The old woman then dies. Meeting the father of the two old women later on, he refers to the great carp as the noble fish and his master. He asks Wolf to ring the bell and feed it, so using some precious bait he'd found earlier on, he feeds the huge carp. The old woman's father thanks Wolf and says that the carp is happy, joyous even. Now, during his confronting of the first memory of the Hirata attack just before the estate, by the bridge, Wolf can come across a pot noble. The pot noble, called Harunaga, is asking for some treasure carp scales in exchange for items. Harunaga says that he wants to become a carp, a giant carp that will continue growing and live a long life. He says Wolf has the aroma of the divine realm, and because of his kindness, he gives Wolf some truly precious bait and asks he give it to the great carp in exchange for his secret treasure. Wolf meets another pot noble at the Fountainhead Palace, this one called Koromori. He talks about carp scales, asking if Wolf knows anything about them. As he did with Harunaga, Wolf can use the treasure carp scales to purchase items from this pot noble too. Koromori then shares a secret with him and says that he wants Wolf to feed a specific piece of bait to the carp and to not let anyone see him do it. He then receives another truly precious bait. Going back to the feeding grounds, Wolf sneakily feeds the carp either Harunaga or Koromori's truly precious bait. Both of them serve to kill the great carp. Returning to the old woman's father afterwards, he is saddened that the carp has disappeared. He is looking over the edge, calling out for his master. If Wolf travels to the Bodhisattva Valley, the great carp's carcass is washed up here, and Wolf is able to obtain the great white whisker from it. Giving the great white whisker to the father, he realizes the great carp is dead, since this is the only way a whisker can be plucked from it, and he thanks Wolf. Returning to the old woman's father again later on, his daughter is with him, and she is comforting him. In terms of the two pot nobles, the one whose bait you didn't use is dead, but returning to the other one whose bait you did use, well, he is now a carp. I mentioned him in the main rundown when Wolf got to Mibu village, but the last we saw the priest he was guzzling down sake. Well, when in the Fountainhead Palace, a chest can be found and opened which contains water of the palace. It's described as the nectar of the palace nobles. It will be given to people on a wedding procession when arriving at the palace. Anyway, going back to Mibu village, Wolf can give this to the priest there, and upon returning later, the priest will have turned into a noble. Finally, when returning to the dilapidated temple after obtaining the dragon's tears from the divine realm, the sculptor is gone. Not far away though, in Ashina, Wolf can come across a grisly scene. Communing with a sculptor's idol, it takes him to the large courtyard in front of the castle gates, and there's a large beast there taking out a bunch of Central Force soldiers. Confronting the beast, called the Demon of Hatred, and eventually killing it, the beast thanks Wolf. This beast is actually the sculptor. He'd given into his anger and resentment. The only way he could be free was to become a demon and be killed and set free. But a little bit more about the sculptor. Giving Emma some sake, she reveals that she has a strong connection with monkeys as she was rescued by one. She stood as a child alone in the aftermath of a battle. There was a monkey eating a rice ball who gave it to Emma. This monkey was the sculptor, who was known as the orangutan. Giving him sake, who reveals more about this.
猿どもの住む谷、そこで忍び修行をしておった。
一人か？
いや、二人でじゃな。わしらははぐれ忍び。まともな死はもはやおらなんだ。ゆえに落ちれば死ぬる谷でただひたすらにかけ飛び刃を交える。そのような修行を重ねた。じき猿と変わらぬほどには動けるようになったわ。
He also reveals that Ishin was the one who cut off his arm, as the sculptor had started to enjoy killing. Ishin cut off his arm in order to prevent him from becoming Shura. Finally, early on in the game, Wolf can come to a ledge across a hidden path and see something very creepy down in a dark cave. These scary enemies are the Headless. There are 4 of them, and they are the ruined form of corrupted heroes who once fought for Japan. They are Akko, who went mad after trying to seize the power of an inhuman spirit, Ungo, who attempted a mutiny but was executed and dumped in the reservoir, Gachin, who drifted into the hidden forest, Gokan, who is fixated on the burial mounds in the sunken valley, and lastly Yashikaru, who fell to the Fountainhead Palace nobles. At certain points their spirits would be used to imbue candy with power, such as reducing damage and increasing attack power. And that's pretty much it for the story of Sekiro. Like I said at the start of this video, I really enjoyed this game, so much so that it's now my favourite Souls game above Demon's Souls. If you enjoyed this breakdown of the game's story, then please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, but for now, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.